The air in the office hummed with the constant, irritating drone of cooling fans and the faint, chemical scent of industrial pine cleaner. I sat at the heavy oak desk I had personally assembled and carried up the stairs 18 years ago, looking around the cluttered media control room of Summit Events and Media. Over nearly 2 decades, I had practically built this department from the bare studs. I had hand-wired the routing panels, soldered custom connections, labeled every single input feed, and spent countless sleepless nights sleeping on a squeaky folding chair just to ensure our live broadcasts did not fail in front of thousands of viewers. On the wall hung a small, yellowed laminated sign that read, "Valerie Owens, Media Specialist." Underneath it, one of the technicians had once scribbled in permanent marker, "The person who actually keeps this entire place standing." It was a running joke among the event staff, but on this particular Tuesday morning, the joke felt like a cold premonition. My boss, Gerald Thorne, sat across from me in a plush leather chair that had never seen a single drop of sweat or a moment of real work. He refused to look me in the eye. Instead, he kept his gaze firmly fixed on a glossy blue folder on his desk, as if it contained highly sensitive state secrets. "Due to restructuring, corporate realignment, and strategic adjustments," he said, his voice flat, rehearsed, and utterly devoid of human emotion, "we are downsizing your position." The words fell into the quiet room like heavy lead weights. I did not blink. I did not let my hands shake. I simply sat there, letting the hum of the air conditioning fill the sudden silence between us. Gerald cleared his throat, adjusting the gold watch on his wrist, a flashy piece that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "We are bringing in a new media coordinator," he continued, trying to inject an upbeat tone into the conversation. "She is a fresh out of university hire. She will be trained to handle media operations, event logistics, and, well, the other day-to-day tasks you used to manage. It is a budget reset, Valerie. We need to stay competitive in this market." It was not just a layoff, it was a complete replacement. After 18 years of doing the work of 5 people for the price of one, they were discarding me for a cheaper model who did not know the difference between an optical signal and a power cord. "I understand," I said calmly, because I did. Not the corporate logic, but the sheer disrespect. I was too expensive, too experienced, and far too hard to push around. Gerald looked visibly relieved that I was not making a scene, crying, or screaming. "You will need to clear your office by Friday," he added, sliding a thin manila envelope toward me, "and take everything that is yours. You won't be coming back." I stared at the envelope, then let a tiny knowing smile touch my lips. "Of course," I said. "I will take absolutely everything that is mine." Gerald had no idea what he had just approved. He thought he was telling me to pack my coffee mugs, my framed photos of my family, and my spare cardigans. He did not know the history of the room he was sitting in. When I was first hired 18 years ago, Summit Events was a tiny, struggling shop. We had a single digital camera, a couple of basic microphones, and a lot of ambition. As the company grew, the demands of the clients grew exponentially. But the budget for new equipment never did. When a major client wanted a multi-camera setup for a 750-person conference, and the company refused to buy the necessary gear, I went out and bought it myself. I bought the high-end wireless transmitters, the professional video switchers, the audio mixing decks, the heavy-duty fiber optic cables, and the lighting grids. I used my own money, saved from freelance weekend gigs, because I cared about the quality of the work and my reputation. I brought my gear in piece by piece, year by year, until the entire studio was powered by my personal property. Every single item, from the massive backup servers to the smallest adapter cable, was labeled with my initials, Valerie Owens. The other techs used to laugh at how protective I was of my cases. Gerald had once joked during a meeting that I was paranoid for labeling everything. But that detail was about to become their absolute undoing. What they did not realize, or what they had simply forgotten, was that Summit Events did not actually own a media department. They owned a room with 4 walls. The entire AV infrastructure, the live streaming setup, the remote event kits, and the digital encoding systems belonged to me. Not metaphorically, but literally. I went back to my desk and opened my personal Google Drive. I pulled up the folder labeled Equipment Inventory. Inside were scanned receipts, serial numbers, and purchase dates for every piece of gear in the building. The total value was over $75,000, all paid for by me, all registered under my name. I printed the list, tucked it into my bag, and waited for Thursday morning. The countdown had begun, and Gerald had no clue that the countdown was for the demolition of his own company. I arrived at the office at 6 in the morning on Thursday. Long before Gerald Thorne or the new hire, or anyone from Human Resources had turned their keys in the front lock, the hallways were dark and quiet, smelling of empty coffee pots and old dust. I backed my utility vehicle up to the loading dock, popped the trunk, and got to work. I started with the storage closets, where the most valuable items were stored. I pulled down the heavy road cases containing the wireless microphones, the mobile camera rigs, the LED panel lights, and the high-speed optical switchers. Every case was labeled with my initials in bold black ink. I had every receipt saved on my phone, ready to show if security tried to stop me. I moved methodically, wrapping each cable carefully and placing it in its designated slot. By 9 in the morning, the loading dock was stacked with boxes. That was when Gerald walked in, holding a cardboard cup of coffee and looking slightly hungover. He stopped, his eyes wide as he looked at the pile of gear. "Valerie, what is all this?" he asked, his voice tight. "I am packing my things, Gerald," I said, not stopping as I coiled a 100-foot fiber optic cable. "You told me to take everything that was mine, and that I would not be coming back. I am just following your instructions." Gerald stared at a stack of mixing boards, then looked at the empty space on the shelves. "You cannot take that switcher," he stammered, pointing at the heart of our live broadcast setup. "We have the Northwest Regional Education Conference on Monday. It is a massive event across 4 cities. We have over 450 guests attending in person and 3,000 viewers online. We need that gear to run the broadcast." I pulled a laminated sheet from my pocket and handed it to him. It was a list of serial numbers matching the invoices in my folder. "I bought that switcher 4 years ago, Gerald. The company refused to approve the purchase, so I paid for it myself. It is mine. If you want to check the registration, I have the receipt right here." Gerald's face went pale, a sickly color that looked terrible in the fluorescent light. "Well, can you at least leave it here until Tuesday? We will pay you a rental fee." I smiled, a cold and empty gesture. "No, Gerald. You told me I won't be coming back. I am not leaving my equipment in a building where I am no longer welcome." I loaded the switcher into my car. Sylvia Cole, one of the only event coordinators left, who still had a shred of decency, came out to help me with the heavier cases. She whispered to me as we lifted a rack of wireless receivers. "Gerald is losing his mind," she said, looking back toward the glass doors. "He has no idea how any of this works. He thinks the stream just happens on its own. He told the management team that the gear belonged to the building." "I know," I said. "He is about to get a very expensive education in ownership." By 3 in the afternoon, the control room was empty. The shelves were bare, showing the dust that had gathered over 18 years. The backup servers were gone. The encoding rigs were gone. The control booth was nothing but empty tables and dangling wires that led to nowhere. When I finally drove away, my vehicle was sagging under the weight of the equipment. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Gerald standing on the curb, looking small and utterly confused. He looked like a man who had just realized he had sold the engine of his car and expected it to still drive him home. On Friday, I stayed home. I did not answer my phone. I spent the day organizing the gear in my garage, lining up the road cases against the wall. My neighbor Brian walked over with a cup of coffee and looked at the mountain of cases. "Big project?" he asked, whistling. "Not exactly," I replied. "More like the start of a new business." As the sun set, I sat on my porch and looked at the calendar. Monday was less than 72 hours away. The Northwest Regional Education Conference was the biggest event of the spring for Summit Events. It was a high-profile broadcast that paid them a massive retainer. I had spent the last 5 years running it without a single glitch. But on Monday, they would have to run it without the gear and without the only person who knew how to connect it. I remembered what my father, a retired electrician, had told me when I first started working. "Never loan out your tools to people who do not respect your trade." I had kept my tools. Now, Gerald was going to have to find his own. I spent the rest of the evening writing the business structure for VO Event Systems, detailing the services I would offer. I was confident that before the next week was over, I would have my first client. Monday morning arrived with a cold, relentless rain that beat heavily against my garage windows. Usually, on a broadcast day, I would have been up at 4 in the morning, downing cold coffee while checking signal routes. Today, I woke up at 7, brewed a fresh pot of high-quality dark roast, and watched the downpour from the comfort of my kitchen. I did not log into the Summit Events network. My administrative access had been completely cut off on Friday night, which was standard corporate procedure. Instead, I opened a clean document and continued working on the business plan and proposal for a local community college that needed their upcoming fall lecture series broadcasted. I was just finishing the draft of the pricing structure for VO event systems when my personal phone began to vibrate on the counter. It was Sylvia Cole. I let it ring until it cut to voicemail. 2 minutes later, she called again. This time, I answered. Valerie, please tell me you are near your computer and can access the network. Sylvia gasped, her voice thick with panic and barely audible over the background noise of shuffling feet and shouting. The conference is supposed to start in less than 1 hour. The venue is a complete disaster. The client is absolutely furious. Gerald told the new media hire to set up the main stream using her personal laptop and some cheap webcams she found in the back of a storage closet. She does not even know how to route the audio inputs or check the bandwidth. The client saw the setup and threatened to cancel our entire multi-year contract on the spot. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, feeling a profound sense of peace. I wish I could help you, Sylvia, I said calmly, but I do not work there anymore. I am simply doing exactly what Gerald instructed me to do. I cleared out my office, took what was mine, and left. Valerie, please, Sylvia pleaded. Gerald is pacing the halls, sweating through his jacket. He is in a complete panic. He actually asked me if there is any way you would come down to the venue as an independent consultant just for the morning. He said the company is willing to pay you. I did not answer immediately. The heavy silence stretched between us, filled only with the faint static of the cellular line and the sound of rain. Let Gerald call me himself and ask, I said quietly. I hung up the phone. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was an unrecognized number, but I recognized the corporate prefix. I picked it up on the 4th ring. Valerie? Gerald's voice was high, thin, and completely stripped of the executive authority he had used to fire me just a few days ago. Valerie, we have a massive problem here. The live feed is not working. The audio has a terrible hum, the video keeps dropping frames, and the panelists in the other 3 cities cannot connect to the primary feed. We need you to come down to the venue right now and fix this. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the gray sky. I am unavailable for emergency calls, Gerald, I said. You told me my position was downsized. You told me to take my things and leave because I would not be coming back. I followed your directions perfectly. Valerie, please, he stammered, his voice cracking. The client is threatening to sue us for breach of contract. This event is worth $50,000 to Summit. I can pay you your regular hourly rate for the day. I let out a dry, sharp laugh. My regular hourly rate? You must be joking, Gerald. I am a business owner now, not your underpaid employee. If you want my services and my gear, you will have to pay my corporate consulting rates. What are your rates? He asked, his voice shaking. I had already prepared the quote and sent it to his inbox 20 minutes earlier. Check your email, Gerald. You will find a formal agreement for emergency technical consulting. My rate is 5 times my old hourly salary, with a minimum guarantee of 8 hours. You have exactly 3 hours to sign it and return it to me. If it is not signed by noon, I am turning off my phone. I stood up and walked over to the window. The rain washed over the driveway, rushing down toward the street drains. I thought about the hundreds of mornings I had driven through this exact weather, my mind filled with stress about whether the power would hold or if a client's team would trip over a critical feed. I had carried that burden for almost 2 decades, and now I was standing in my own house, listening to the man who dismissed me beg for a lifeline. It was a bizarre, almost surreal feeling. Gerald continued talking, his voice a rapid-fire stream of excuses and explanations. He said that the company had a long history of success, and that I should not let a minor administrative shift ruin our professional relationship. He accused me of being unreasonable, arguing that 5 times my previous salary was highway robbery. I let him finish, my face completely expressionless. I reminded him that my rates reflected the market value of my technical expertise, my immediate availability, and the rental of my personal equipment, which they had neglected to replace. I told him that he had exactly 3 hours to choose between paying my business rate or explaining to the client why their $50,000 event was a complete failure. I hung up the phone before he could reply, placing it face down on the kitchen counter. I knew that he would try to find another way out, but I had blocked every possible exit. The clock was ticking, and his options were running out. While Gerald Thorne was frantically reading my email, he tried to find a quick way to bypass my demands. He did not want to pay my emergency rate, which amounted to a significant sum of money. He ordered the remaining technical staff to copy my custom stream configuration profiles, my graphic overlays, and my proprietary media control software settings from our backup network drives. They planned to load these files onto their own laptops and run the broadcast. They thought they could use my intellectual property without paying for it. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. I had developed those software templates, custom-coded overlays, and complex system configurations on my own personal laptop during my weekends and evenings over the past 7 years. I had registered these original digital creations with the United States Copyright Office under my own name. They were my exclusive property. Specifically, I had designed a custom network layout for the video routing software, built an automated script that balanced the audio levels across the 4 remote feeds, and created custom HTML graphical templates that displayed the speaker names and corporate sponsors. These files were not generic. They were the result of hundreds of hours of coding on my personal time. I had even placed a hidden copyright notice inside the code, which was standard practice for me. When the new hire attempted to load the template, the system threw an error, showing my name across the technician's monitor. The moment Sylvia Cole texted me that the team was attempting to upload my custom graphics, I called my attorney. Within 20 minutes, a formal cease and desist letter was delivered directly to Gerald Thorne and the corporate headquarters of Summit's parent company. The letter cited copyright infringement under Title 17 United States Code, Section 106. Under Section 106, the owner of a copyright has the exclusive rights to reproduce the work, prepare derivative works, and distribute copies of the work. The letter explained that the unauthorized copying and public display of my proprietary digital assets constituted a willful violation of federal law, exposing the company to statutory damages of up to $150,000 per infringement under Section 504, in addition to our legal fees. The corporate legal department did not hesitate. They realized the massive exposure. A federal copyright lawsuit would destroy the parent company's reputation and cost them far more than my consulting fee. The general counsel called Gerald and ordered him to cease all use of my software and overlays immediately. The stream had to be shut down until a proper license was secured. With no other options and the clock ticking toward his deadline, Gerald signed my consulting contract. The encrypted digital signature cleared in my merchant accounting system at 1:30 in the afternoon. By 2 in the afternoon, I was logged into their backup system remotely from my house. I did not go to the venue as there was no need for my physical presence. I had built the network routing from scratch, and I knew how to stabilize the feed from my home office. I walked Sylvia Cole through the physical connections over the phone, telling her which cables to move and which settings to adjust. Specifically, I accessed the servers through a secure shell connection protocol on my primary console. On my screen, the data packets were flowing in a disorganized mess because the new media coordinator had routed the audio feeds through the primary video bandwidth, choking the stream. I ran a script I had written months ago, separating the data channels and prioritizing the audio stream. In a matter of seconds, the signal stabilized. Within 20 minutes, the audio hum vanished. The video feeds from the cities stabilized. The stream went live, and the 3,000 viewers online finally saw a clear, professional picture. The conference was saved, but the damage to Gerald's reputation was already done. The stream had been offline for 45 seconds during the opening remarks, and the client had witnessed the total chaos behind the scenes. That evening, my invoice was paid in full, 5 times my old rate, no excuses, no delays. It was the first time in 18 years that the company had paid me what I was actually worth. But the real victory was not the money, it was the shift in power. I was no longer the invisible employee. I was the vendor, and they were the desperate client. I shut down my computer, poured myself a glass of wine, and watched the rain clear. I knew in my heart that this was only the first of many lucrative contracts for VO Event Systems. I had established a precedent, and Gerald knew that, if he ever wanted to use my systems again, he would have to pay the price I set. 4 months after I walked out of Summit Events and Media, I stood in the control room of the Lakeside Civic Auditorium. I wore a headset and held a digital tablet, monitoring the audio feeds for the Regional Education Futures Gala. The room was filled with 1,200 guests, and the live stream was broadcasting smoothly to over 5,000 viewers. This was the 7th major contract my new company, VO Event Systems, had executed in the last 11 weeks. I had hired 3 part-time AV techs and an assistant. My calendar was booked through the fall. I was finally building something that belonged to me. The main hall was spectacular, with high ceiling arches and modern acoustic panels. I stood in the back, watching the technicians I had hired adjust the wireless camera angles. We had set up 4 separate broadcast stations, all connected to our main switcher. My assistant, Sylvia, who had left Summit shortly after the conference disaster, was managing the speaker queues. On my lapel, the vendor badge read, Valerie Owens, President of VO Event Systems. It was a proud moment. While my business was growing, Summit Events was rapidly collapsing. The fallout from the conference disaster had been severe. The client had terminated their multi-year contract the following Friday, citing technical incompetence and breach of trust. Without that contract, and with the news of the copyright dispute spreading through the industry, other clients began to question Summit's technical capabilities. In the corporate world, news of incompetence travels fast. 6 other major clients canceled their accounts within a month, transferring their business to smaller, more reliable agencies. The parent company's board was furious. They launched an internal audit of the media division and discovered that Gerald had wasted tens of thousands of dollars on unneeded software subscriptions and high-end office furniture, while letting the actual technical infrastructure rot. He had fired the only person holding it together. On Friday afternoon, I received a call from Eleanor Vance, the chief financial officer of the parent company. I had only met her once before, but her voice was warm and respectful now. Valerie, she said, I am calling to discuss the recent changes at Summit. Gerald Thorne has officially resigned, and we have parted ways with 3 other senior staff members. We are restructuring the media division, and we would like to offer you a corporate consulting retainer for 4 upcoming projects. We realize your expertise is difficult to replace, and we want to work with you directly. I sat back in my chair, looking at the neatly coiled cables on my shelves. I appreciated the offer, Eleanor, I said, but I am no longer interested in corporate employment. VO Event Systems is fully operational. However, I am open to licensing my technical frameworks and providing consulting services under our standard vendor terms. Eleanor did not hesitate. Send over your proposal, she said. We will review it immediately. The contract was signed the next morning, on my terms, with my rates, and with my name on the header. Under the terms of this licensing agreement, Summit was required to pay a substantial monthly fee to continue using my custom-developed setup layouts, network routing templates, and software profiles. I retained full, undivided ownership of the intellectual property, and they were legally barred from modifying or sharing the system with any external parties without my prior written consent. If they violated any of these terms, the license would be revoked immediately, leaving them without their media infrastructure once again. Eleanor signed the document without a single objection. A week later, I was invited to speak on a prominent panel at a regional conference for women in technology. The room was packed with hundreds of professionals, from young interns to senior executives. The topic was professional ownership and independence. When it was my turn to speak, I shared the story of how I had built a company's entire infrastructure on my own dime, only to be downsized and replaced. I described the moment I was told to take what was mine and how I did exactly that. During the question and answer session, a young woman in her late 20s stood up, her voice shaking slightly as she asked how to handle a boss who did not respect her work. I looked at her, seeing myself 18 years ago. Document everything, I advised the young woman. Keep your receipts, put your name on your work, and never let them make you feel like you are lucky to be there. They are the lucky ones. After the session, she came up to thank me, tears in her eyes. That was the moment I realized the true value of my revenge. It was not about watching Gerald lose his job. It was about realizing that when I walked out of that building, I had not just taken my cameras and my switchers, I had taken my power. And at 68 years old, I was finally using it to build my own future.